A very good evening to all the participants and the people who are attending today's interview. It's the fourth interview of this session, and today we have a new host, Murugaraj Shanmugam, and he will be in conversation with Dr. Venkat. Like both of them have presented quite a few webinars, so we know what all they know about our field, but today we want to know more about them and how they ended up in this field and how what is it that drives their passion regarding copy editing training. So over to you, Murugraj.
Thank you, Vivek. Good evening, everyone. And this is a wonderful experience to be part or being a host for an interview. And this is the first time I'm interviewing somebody, so I'm a bit, it's kind of mixed feelings. I'm a bit nervous, not because I'm in front of the camera for the first time, but because this is my first interview. And I'm really glad that the first interview is with Dr. Venkat. And so this, the Win series, as we call, and as rightly named by Vivek, has been picking up a momentum and it is steadily going. We have completed 25 sessions or 26 sessions, if I'm right, with respect to the Sunday webinars on various topics on editing and related to editing. And this Saturday series, especially interviews and conversations, the break free series. So all of them are, making these weekends a lot more engaging for editors. And thank you, Vivek, and to the wonderful team of editors and writers from ICF. You are the reason for the success of this entire program. All right, so thank you very much. And I welcome Dr. Venkat. And he is a person who is known to the community, editorial community, especially ICF. For me, I know him by name for a very long time. In fact, we each other knew by name for a long time, so through common friends. And I met Dr. Venkat for the first time in the conference organized by Visalakshi, the first ever uh, editors conference organized in Chennai. So that was wonderful, watching him talk about the quality metrics and how he arrived at all those things. And for the last 2.5 years, he has been doing a lot on in terms of training, online training, especially coming out with his website, The Art of Copy Editing. So being a person who is also into training, who came up very recently with some training online, I'm very much interested and eager to have this interview today. Once again, welcome, Dr. Venkat.
Thank you, Murugaraj, and hi everyone. Look forward to the set of questions from Murugaraj. And generally, uh, I've been teaching for so many years, and then every time somebody asks a question or a doubt, I generally get away by asking questions and asking them some question in return. And I know that today I can't escape that way. That way I know it's going to be fun.
I always say editing in India is not a career that is chosen. All right, most of us stumbled into editing at some point of time and see that this is a great field to be part of, to make career out of, and we became editors at some point of time. I became an editor after almost 1 year into editing. When I joined, I never realized that I'm going to be an editor for lifelong. But after 6 or 7 months, I realized this is going to be a good career, and I liked it. I loved it. So I slowly got into the actual mode of editing. And this is a story with many of us. I have heard during many of the discussions that people shared that how they become accidental editors. So how did it happen for you?
Mm, maybe it's like this. Maybe God was preparing me for it. I mean, that's how I would put it. Because when I stumbled into it, I didn't have the slightest hesitation. I recognized this is my field. Okay, it was like right during the college days, I used to read a lot of books. I was a voracious reader. I used to read fiction as well as a lot of academic books, and I had a peculiar interest, um, with dictionaries. I used to spend a lot of time, particularly Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, Hornby, okay, the one you have even now. I used to somehow like it because uh, I'm a guy who grew up with that general idea that every day you read a newspaper and all that. I mean, it's not that I really did that, but I used to do a lot of voracious reading, and whenever I felt something that I didn't understand, I used to look at the dictionary, and I think I made use of the dictionary to a very great extent. Okay. And I think that was something that helped me, number one. And MSc days, we were asked to prepare a dissertation, and I spent a lot of time trying to read and understand how to actually write a dissertation and all that. I remember reading one book, a very tiny book, okay, Thesis and Assignment Writing by one Anderson, Durston, and Poole. There were three authors there. And I think that was one piece that helped me understand something about it, okay. And MSc, PhD, a lot of research activity. And after my PhD, I joined, even during PhD days, I used to correct whatever people wrote, and then at some point, people used to give me things to correct. There was a natural inclination towards writing and correcting things. And people used to give me things to small paper presentations, etc., etc. They used to give me. And after my PhD, I was a biochemist for about a year. And very soon, I just got pretty bored. All I had to do was just put blood samples into an automated machine and then get the results out. And then the afternoon, we used to do some chromatography. But it's such a contrast to the active life that we had during the PhD days. So I was trying to record, and then one day I saw an ad. It was an ad by SPS. And then I just applied. And then they gave me a test. And then the moment I looked at the test paper and started writing, I knew this was my field. Okay, there was no question about it. And that's how I came into editing, and been there throughout.
So love at first sight for you.
Yeah. The way a duck takes to water, they say, I just took it like that.
Talking about your PhD, and I remember from one of your conversations, you talked about how you maintain the index cards and other things, and how it helped you in later when you chose copy editing as your career. You want to talk about it for a while?
Yeah. See, in research, preparing, deciding on a topic of work, okay, that itself was an important thing, because our guide used to tell us, tentative guide, you choose somebody and that person decides to accept you. Okay, just read up on this field, read up on that field, okay. Young people, and that was when I realized it was very difficult to read and understand a scientific paper. I just couldn't understand anything. That was how it was the beginning, okay. I don't know, but time things changed. And I remember at a certain point, even today, I remember the name of the paper, okay. It was a paper on atherosclerosis by a guy called Ross, okay, Ronald Ross. He was an expert, and I think it took about 2 years, 2.5 years to reach that point when I felt, okay, I really read the paper fully and I understood it completely, thoroughly. It was a review paper, okay. But during the time when you do research, when you try to prepare, okay, decide on an area, topic, you study the literature, you read a lot, and then at the same time, you keep track of what you read and what is the source material, okay, from where you read something. So that way, I used to keep track of references, okay, document those references, okay. And again, I used to use index cards for that. And because I had written a dissertation in MSc and where I had read a few things, okay, this is how you go about research. I had some idea, and I was very particular about maintaining my index cards. And when you do that kind of literature survey, you understand a lot about reference in the sense, okay, sometimes you'll read something and then you'll find a reference and then it won't be available in a library, in your library, then you go elsewhere. And sometimes you'll have to go to some other library where you'll have to get your director's permission and then that director's permission and all that. And then we go there. uh, you want to go there not just for one paper, maybe for a few other papers. And then, but still one or two are very important. And then you go there, open it, and then you see that, open that journal and then see. And then that particular reference has got nothing to do with what you've been searching for. Okay, absolutely irrelevant. Okay, so those were things. These were eye openers. Okay, I realized that when somebody cites a reference, it has to be exact. And later on, when I was doing copy editing, I realized the importance of being clear about it. When you do some kind of a renumber, you cannot afford to make a single mistake there. These are, and then looking at various journals, different styles. Okay, I became very familiar with all this during research. And every time you read a paper, you look at the introduction, you look at the materials and methods, results discussion. Sometimes they're given separate, sometimes they're given together. So when you read all that, you know this is how a paper is structured. And during my PhD, I mean, very early in my PhD, I would say I was lucky enough to read How to Write and Publish a Scientific Paper by Robert Day. That's been a Bible of writing for many years. Okay, even today it's a very famous book. I think it's in its 5th edition, maybe even a next one has come, I don't know. Right at the beginning. Okay, so that way you know what is a thesis, or how do you write it, how do you break it down. So by the time I came to copy editing, I was pretty clear, and I was into journal work when I started out. Okay, so I was able to connect everything very quickly. So that was something that was advantageous. I was able to understand reference styling, all the various styles. Okay, in those days, I mean, we were lucky, I would say. We were exposed to so many different styles. Almost every journal had a different style. There was a time when we were working about 40 plenum journals and 60 Wiley journals, and each one had a different style. Okay, and then I understood references in terms of, I mean, purely because I did my own literature survey and I did my own search. Okay, I understood that you require an author name, an author, a title of work, and a source. These are the 3 components of any reference. And then what are the things that are required to locate? Whether if it's a journal, what do you require? If it is a book, what do you require? If it is a proceedings, what do you require? Okay, these are the things I learned just by searching for references on my own. So these were practical helps. And then when later on, when we came to copy editing and we started doing that, I was able to connect all this. And then the entire course and references that I've built is based on those principles of practically trying to access a journal. That is, suppose you have information, whatever information is there in a journal, in a reference, it must be locatable. If it cannot be located, it's of no value. You can have all sorts of descriptions that are extra information, but this must be essential. That is one. And then when you write, as I told you, the different components of the paper, and then the clarity with which paper has to be written. These are some of the things that really helped me, I would say.
I can see that.
People used to, sorry to continue. People used to ask me, "What are you doing here in copy editing?" I mean, people in those days, a lot of people used to go for the postdocs. Okay, I didn't really apply for a postdoc or something, but I did apply to a few places for editing jobs. Okay, and I used to feel that, okay, there are two aspects to science. One is doing science, the other is writing science. In fact, Robert Day says in that book, the goal of research is publication. Okay, that's a very tricky statement. Okay, when you do research, you basically you're doing it because of curiosity. You want to know how things work, what happens. But then you have that is of no use unless you communicate it to the world. Okay, so from that perspective, Robert Day will say that the goal of research is publication. Okay, because he was writing a book that was titled "How to Write and Publish a Scientific Paper." Okay, and copy editing is more related to the writing aspects of science, the communication aspects of science. So it's directly related, I would say, the background.
I can see that, and I can also see that how these research years have become the formative years for your copy editing career.
Yeah.
And I can also understand the emphasis you place on references. Sometimes looking at the courses that are available on art of copy editing, I sometimes wonder why this man is placing a lot of emphasis on documentation. But I can relate. CMS devotes 3 or 4 chapters for documentation on various ways of documenting. So
there is actually a difference of just add on just a few points to add on to that. See, there is a difference there. Okay, for example, if you read the Subversive Copy Editor, she says the experts hang out. She talks about documentation references, and that's where the experts hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that means you start doing copy editing, and slowly you become good at it, and at that point you are really courageous enough to take up the CMS and read that in and out. But it was not like that. In those days, we used to be taught references first. Okay,
yeah.
And I still believe even today that starting off people with references will help, because there are so many tiny nitty-gritties. Okay, so many things. Attention to detail is actually developed. Okay, when somebody does references, and this attention to detail is not something that a common man will have. Definitely will not have. Okay, and so many things we will know intellectually, or okay, this is what I have to do, but still we will keep on missing. So those initial days of shock, okay, will give us some kind of a self-realization. Okay, this is not a normal kind of a job. Okay, you need a tremendous focus here. And then I remember discussing there was some kind of a client visit elsewhere, North American Health Sciences. Somebody had come, the top guys had come there, and then I was talking to them about how I train people and all that. And then that person mentioned, yes, I really understand today with technology and everybody using automation for references. So what people think is, okay, the references are sort of automated to a great extent, and then so you can actually train the people on language, and then they'll come up fast. There, it actually doesn't happen that way. See, suppose you have a child. I give this example very often. No matter what food you give to that child, it will still take 8 months to stand up and walk. Okay, maybe plus or minus some days. Okay, but the child needs that time, okay, to stand up and walk. Same way, if you take a fresher, a raw person, and then put that person onto copy editing, that person will need some time to understand what this job is. Okay, that way putting them through references will help them to actually pick up the basics and still keep them in the groove. That precious time is sort of simply removed from the process, because the person comes in and you start doing the references through automation. Okay, that learning time is lost, and no matter what you do, you will still require the time. That person will require the time to pick it up. That's my view, actually. And that person was able to really appreciate that. He said, that's a very important point. I also feel that that time is lost, and there's no way you can compensate for it.
This is more so, when considering India as a hub of e-publishing companies where we serve major publishers. Talking more about the volume, all right. So the automation and also the arrival of DOI, the digital object identifiers, that has reduced the need for a lot of information to be crunched in references. I know a publisher who simply writes down the name of the author or the author group and then follows that with a title and a DOI. That's it. So they say that even the title and the author group is not necessary, but still, it should not be a string of DOIs. So they say they
It's true,
that.
it's true. Sorry to interrupt you. For a journal type of reference, see, even though in a list of reference, you simply have the list of authors, okay? Throughout the entire list, you have the authors list.
Others.
Journal work, actually, this is an interesting exercise I used to have with my people, okay? Literally imagine you go to a library and try to locate a journal article or a book or something like that. And then slowly we'll realize that I do not need the name of the author, I do not need the title. I just require the name of the journal, the volume number, page number, and now maybe even that is not required, simply an article number maybe.
Yes.
And as you say, the DOI.
Now, since the search for information has become more and more online, the DOIs comes handy rather than the need for page number, journal issues, volume numbers, everything. So that's another good observation. So I couldn't agree more with respect to the point about how this documentation or understanding documentation for a copy editor is very important. We may not really do anything with respect to editing those references or reference entries, largely automated in the Indian scenario, but still understanding the overall picture, the the overall picture of what copy editing is can be achieved only by understanding the language components and the documentation part of it. One without the other is certainly not a complete picture.
I still believe references can be the base for understanding language editing. See, you have certain components in a journal, for example, as you said, journal reference. You may have just the author name of the DOI or something like that, but in a book type reference, you will need a lot more things. Okay. See, you don't give the ISBN number unless somebody is going to buy the book. So if you don't give that, you will need all the information. Okay. But when you have these pieces of information, you may have a title, you may have a subtitle, or you may have a part title, you may have a two-part title. Okay. Now, you may have a descriptor. When you have all this, it might be easy at the initial stage, but when we have more and more references like that, to understand how these are connected, okay, how these are related. The number of components are limited, but you need to understand how these are related and where they have to be placed in a given style, that has a certain punctuation associated with that. Okay. There, particularly when you have descriptors, which is the fourth component of references, okay, and you will find plenty of them in reports, proceedings. Okay. There, you have to think and you have to place them in separate places. Okay, you will have one descriptor, two descriptors, and one may be kept with the title, and other maybe at the end. Sometimes both of them at the end. Okay, and this involves some kind of a thinking. And when you extrapolate it, when you look at a sentence, there you have a bunch of words just strung together, and you have to find out what each one is and how these things are related. Okay, so basically you have to unravel the relationship between the words. You have to understand the syntax. So I still feel that doing reference styling is a very important component. Okay, particularly, I mean, I would say in India it helps. Okay, I'm sure it helped in the Western world at the earlier stage. But even here, because for us, India, I mean, English is not the native tongue. So many of us try to think in our tongue, native tongue, and then translate it. Okay, so we do have that kind of a problem, and then this will help us in that thinking process. that analysis, okay, sentence analysis process?
Yes, I think talking about the editing and the time it takes for an editor to become an independent editor. Probably I belong to the last generation where a lot of emphasis was placed on training. I underwent training for almost 3 months just for the training session, a classroom training every day in and out for 2 months, and then followed by editing practice, and then went into the production floor, started editing again, handheld by a team of experienced people. Visalakshi from ICF, she was my mentor. She is actually so that it took almost 6 months for a person to become an editor. It's not an easy joke. You don't become an independent editor. That's a term that we used to have in my earlier company where I started my Integra, where I started my career. So becoming an independent editor is not easy. It takes 5 months, 6 months, or sometimes more than that. But with the focus on productivity, more volume, and other things, the approach to editing or training editors has completely changed. All right. Right now, the question is, how many weeks do you need? And even though weeks cannot exceed 4 or 5. Okay. So I remember in one of my discussions with my boss in my previous company, uh, we need to bring people into editing in a maximum of 2 months, because that's, and I mean, they have a valid reason also, because editing is certainly not a first choice career for most of us. Still, people come here, try out whether editing works for them, and as in the marketing terminology, the retention is only very low. It's very low, maybe 15-20% is a good number. So naturally, the expectation is to bring them into production as soon as possible and then make them editors. You started training. I mean, not from a not for companies, not being part of companies, but you started art of copy editing 2 years ago and started offering training. So how did you made up your mind with respect to the training, whether to follow the old school of idea of training people and then bringing them to speed as they become eligible for each of these stages? I strongly believe in the stage-wise, editing practice or learning. So they become exposed to concepts in a graded manner, and then slowly they evolve into an independent editor over a period of time. So with us being part of corporates, it is not always possible. It is not possible nowadays. So how did you made up your mind in terms of designing your course?
Actually, there are a couple of, if I understand your question correctly, there are many components to your question. I did design this separately. Okay, it is just an extension of whatever I was doing when I was in the corporate world. Number one. Number two, you mentioned something about, the question itself is very vast. The implications are very, very vast. Let's understand that. This is not a prime profession or something where somebody just wants to come. Okay, you mentioned something like that, right? What's the word you used? It's a secondary something you said.
I couldn't recall.
That is, people and
First choice of career.
they come into it accidentally and then decide to stay. It's not that. Now, that's because it's not yet become a field like that. Suppose you look at publishing. Publishing in India and publishing abroad, publishing is as a profession in its own right. Okay, here it's more of printing, distribution, and things like that. It is still not matured. Okay, as much. Number one. Number two. It has to be financially viable. People must be able to earn, and that's probably one of the reasons why we are not able to actually, offer it in a very aggressive manner. But you have to understand that there's a tremendous volume coming to India. Tremendous volume, unbelievable volume. Okay, that is because there is something in India which is It could have been the cost factor that drove this, okay. But that also implies that there is a lot of higher level work that is still untapped. That is one part, okay. And that part, I mean, if you can tap that, you can get a better revenue, and you might be able to drive things internally in a better way. But that in turn involves preparation. That is from the company perspective, okay. That is one aspect of your question, if I understand you correctly. The second was, okay, even I've been asked the same questions that you talked about. And even at that time, I used to say it'll take 3 years, okay. And they used to tell me, how can you expect people to need to wait for 3 years? And all that. These are questions that I've been asked, no doubt. But I have looked at it very objectively. Whatever is the problem, what is the best way to solve this? That is the only thing. And there was also some kind of idealism attached to it. What is this job? What is the best way it can be done? Okay, that has been there throughout. Okay. Now, what is it that a company wants? They want people to be put to production very quickly, as early as possible. So I thought about this and I devised my own methods of doing this. Again, this is, as I said, this is a very vast thing. In a modern setup, what you have is there is something called pre-editing, and maybe somebody else calls the next step as technical editing, or some people call it copy editing. And then you have a language editing and maybe some QC or whatever. These are all the ways in which things are split. And I also split this, but in a very different way. I split it in terms of what is the first thing to learn, what is the next thing to learn, what is the next thing to learn. Okay, that means the first aspect is breaking down copy editing into smaller chunks, and you sort of develop stages of learning. Number one, and then so I teach people, say, references. Immediately they'll start doing references. That means there is an immediate application of what they have learned. And then you start teaching them citations. They start doing citations. Now, when they start doing that, the first month is training. The second month they're in production. Okay, so that way I satisfied the company's requirements. Okay, so second month they are into production. Not only that, I used to pair them with some senior person, so that every bit of what they do, every single bit of what they do will be checked. Okay, full feedback, written feedback. I used to have and it worked very well. I mean, Vivek knows this because we started that in Aptara, and we ran it. I ran it for about 15, 16 years. Okay, after that point, and I would say that it was a phenomenal thing because it was a success. You can be sure when somebody comes in, is that person learning or not? Okay, does that person need help? In what area does the person need help? Okay, put them through another round of training or something like that. It was very easy to find that. Okay, so I had a method by which I used to put people onto this. This is the next one. This is the next one. This is the next one. By the time they come to the third one, that means they are doing 3 things together. By the time they come to the third one, they are clear about the first one. Okay, and then they start doing the fourth one. The first one will, the checking will stop. Now what you have in a typical system in a company, the QC, those guys keep on checking everything. There's no end, there's no limit. Okay, and how do you do a QC on copy editing? The only way is to read it fully. There's no other way. If you're going to just look at what they have done, you may see what they have done correctly or incorrectly, but there can be so many misses. Okay, so the only way you can actually review copy editing, look at its quality, is to simply read through it, and that is going to take time, and that doesn't make sense. That simply doesn't make sense. Okay, a copy editor has to take responsibility and do it fully. And when this person becomes an independent copy editor, that's the term you used, it's a very coveted, status or whatever. To reach that, it will take time, but as and when these people are learning their work, everything that they do is checked on a daily basis, 100% written feedback. So the person who's checking also knows this person is strong here, this person is weak here. Okay. And the burden of checking on the person, on the partner, okay, is also not high. At any point of time, that person is going to check just 3 or 4. 4 is very rare. Generally, it's only 3. Okay. And over a period of time, this person will start doing more and more things, but that person will continue to check just about 3 things. And then when you start the language, I'll ask them to do 1 page. The rest, it's like a relay race because the process is so clearly defined. The beginner does this and then hands over that article to the experienced person. The experienced person takes it up from there. This in turn will require a lot of tweaking in terms of production tracking. And that is also something I thought about. Okay, we had something called a pre-copy edit analysis, okay, where we decide what is to be done in the manuscript and how much of time it will take for every manuscript, okay. I remember when we first designed it, people used to take 3 hours, okay. But then it was just a 10-15 minute job, okay, at the beginning. And I sincerely feel it's important that you do this pre-copy analysis. Why? Because I've done research. I know what it is. When somebody sends a paper, okay, to an editorial office and it gets published, I know that person would have spent 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years to, get those 50 pages or 30 pages of research out, okay. And you spend 20 minutes just to understand this paper overall before you start tampering with this. I think that is an important investment, okay. So the process has to be defined, the production, breaking down this production. Now what happens in companies, suppose there is a 30-page article, the pre-editing guy does 30 pages. The copy editor does 30 pages, the language editor does 30 pages. That is not the way to track production. I mean, it is wrong. So the 30 pages has to be broken down for the guy who's doing just selected parts, and then the other person who's doing the remaining. Sometimes we'll have another problem, the tables. See, you learn numbers, and only when you're very clear with numbers can you really do tables. And then tables, there is something to do with the layout. You have to understand, get a hang of the layout. What is a good layout? And a lot of tables would need a lot of massaging sometimes, okay? So turn it in and out. So people who are actually learning, who know something about numbers, they may be good at certain things, but they may not be able to do tables. So tables will be done by somebody else. Okay, so you will have somebody else doing tables and somebody else doing the language. So and all this is only 30 pages. So it has to be broken down. So the pre-copy analysis is used to help us, to be very clear as to what is the total number of pages and how it is to be split. So maybe, sometime we can have a separate topic, maybe a presentation or a discussion or something, because I still believe it can be done in the Indian industry and it has to be done that way. This is a message for companies, I would say, with, such a long training, is it possible to put people on production in the second month? Yes, it is possible. And when you do that, and as I started out, there are a good number of high-level jobs that come into India. But most of them, the number of high-level jobs that come into India are very minimal, okay. There are a good number of higher level jobs that do not come to India. And if we can take that, and that can be done only through training. And it is through this cycle that you can actually keep moving people up step by step, okay. It can be done. Maybe we can have a separate discussion on that someday.
I can think of, the editor who learns being in part of a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Going through different stages where, each stage is cleared and then moves on to the next one. Or maybe we can liken that to a video game where you clear every level to become upgrade to the next level. So I think over a period of 2 years to 3 years, an editor is complete in the real sense of complete. Understands what is copy editing. Okay,
Yeah,
it
the
is not.
person will become independent maybe 7, 8 months, 9 months, depending on how that person picks up. But then the learning will continue over the years.
Ah, I always prefer to say that copy editing is about lifelong learning.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop at the end of 6 months or 1 year, or after a period of time you are identified as independent. So it goes on. The learning goes on forever, and the more time you put into learning, deliberate practice is something that I always loved about. They say it takes 10,000 hours for somebody to become an expert in any field. They cite a lot of examples. There's a whole lot of studies are going on. And simplifying it to the training aspect of it, I always love the way the deliberate practice can work. 15 minutes every day. Let's not worry about being the Don Bradman or Dhoni or Pele or anybody, but from what we are today, how improved we are tomorrow. Whether these 15 minutes I have invested in learning today can help me improve as an editor tomorrow. So this incremental learning and incremental improvement over a period of time that makes somebody complete in any field for that matter. And reading as one of the most important components of somebody.
The most important, I would say.
The most important. Uh, so I think our focus in India is more about for catering to the lower level of editing services currently to the publishers majorly. As you rightly said, there is an untapped market for substantive editing and higher level of editing. And when we learn and prepare ourselves for the long term, and certainly these work can come into India, and we would be ready for that opportunity. And I'm really glad that ICF is playing a pivotal role in that, because a few years ago, and I have to really appreciate the perseverance of Vivek at this point of time. Okay, Vivek, and I know Vivek. I think in 2008 or 9 we started interacting via LinkedIn. So, and from then on we keep interacting, but at a very uh, not very frequently, but in the last 4 or 5 years, especially in the last 1 year, the way ICF has decided to present itself to the editors, mostly editing community. I mean, of course, ICF is not now simply editors. There are a lot of other people, writers and indexing and a lot of other things. Wonderful session is awaited tomorrow for indexing. But the way the ICF has redesigned itself to cater to the needs of editors, that is really, really commendable. And I actually look forward to how these, your courses and ICF, and in whatever manner I can contribute in terms of the training and other things for. So these fulfill this gap. Maybe.
That's the idea, but in a freelance scenario, things are very different. Even suppose you have a course that is for say 1 month or 2 months. Generally, we give access double the time. Okay, just for just to make sure that you take care of any exigencies. Okay, but even with that, some people complete, some people do not complete, because the pressures, the modern man is subjected to so many pressures, and the information overload is probably taking a very high toll. So a lot depends on how the individual plans, and to take it up and then move forward. So that way, I think ICF helps because it brings people together. Lets them discuss something. At least you put forward your point, put forward your concerns. Somehow you get some kind of energy, and then you start taking the next step. That way, I think definitely ICF helps a lot. No doubt about it.
I really love the idea given by Madhavan here. He suggested to give belts like in karate. Start with probably white belt, move on to yellow, green, and so on and so forth. That up to
No, that's
black
what will happen.
hand,
I
right?
mean, when I mean, it is easier to do this in an organization because you will have a constant interaction and daily discussions. Okay. See, in a company, I sit with somebody every day, somebody or the other. Okay. That way you can monitor it very well. In a freelance scenario, again, it might take some time. It might take time.
Hello.
Yeah.
Did I last you? No, right. Okay. No, I was just thinking about the black belt, how this can be applied. So I momentarily lost. I'm really sorry about that. Okay. So I think we are almost 50 minutes now. Maybe another 10 minutes on a couple of questions that we have had. I have actually a lot of questions. I have asked only 4 of the 10 questions that I have had for you.
Oh,
Possibly we'll
okay.
have a follow-up session sometime in the future, and especially a couple of things that might need a session on its own. For example, how copy editors can stay afloat, and this is extension of what we are discussing, what we have been discussing as to
When you
what.
say afloat, I mean, is that the question or anything more you want to add on that question?
Uh, that's basically the question.
Okay. How do you stay afloat? That means, how do I understand the question? Somebody is sinking and trying to stay afloat, or you already have some life-saving device and you continue to stay afloat? How do I interpret that question?
No, I asked I use a word there in the sense that copy editing in India is not in its real sense in the last 20 years. From in the 1990s when companies started offering their services to large publishers. As you rightly said, we have broken down the entire copy editing process into so many manageable chunks like structuring, pre-editing, copy editing, style editing, language editing, and I think we have run out of names for these teams. The teams. That's why we have stopped categorizing any further. Okay, but this is basically because we wanted to provide cost-effective and quick turnaround services to publishers. You remember from the early days when I started editing, a book is with a copy editor for 2 months easily, 300 pages on average. It lies with a copy editor for 1 month to 2 months. And I once edited a book that is 1,100 pages, renewable energy resources, and I worked on it for almost 4.5 months. Okay. At the end of the copy editing process, the author said, "Nobody has ever read this book since the first edition of my work." Okay, so that's how we spend a lot of time. But currently the scenario has completely changed. 6 months, the book has to be commissioned and then published. That's the entire period we have for the entire life cycle. I mean, for the production cycle. So we have to copy editors have to constantly evolve, adapt to the changing scenario. And as you rightly said, for the freelancers offering a different kind of service, that's one thing. And for people who work with companies, that's a completely different scenario. And so what kind of adjustments a particular copy editor has to completely take so that whatever changes that come in the way, he or she is ready to embrace it and then move on.
Okay. With books being around, with a copy editor for about 1 month or 2 months, we have done plenty of books like that, but I would say that my experience has been a little different. Quite a lot of time we've been doing medical editing. Okay. So those books are with a copy editor for a minimum of 4 to 6 months, or sometimes even more. I mean, I wanted to look at it. 4 to 6 months, maybe more. 100 authors. Okay. And it can be very, very, very demanding. And initially, the copy editor might feel, he can take it easy, but the pressure will start building as the time, passes. Okay. That is about the time spent. And I was lucky enough to have a very strong grounding in journals before moving on to books. So that is an advantage. Staying afloat, you see, first thing is to So there are different genres of editing. Okay, different. I've been into academic editing all through, and there are so many other fields: non-fiction, management, science, humanities, okay, social sciences, and fiction. Whatever be the field, see, I am assuming this person is working somewhere and earning something. Uh, Continue that, but um, learn something every day. As you said, 15 minutes a day, you said something, you mentioned something, right? Something must be learned every day. And jot down whatever problems you see, you encounter. You may not have an answer. See, nowadays I see so many people, simply typing it on WhatsApp, either here or maybe in the editors group, EAE, people ask questions. Sometimes we will get the answer immediately. Sometimes we will get contradictory answers. And then, even though we may do something at that point, we may still be clear. We may not be clear what is the right answer and why we do it that way. So, whenever we have such things, I would suggest you just copy paste it in some document and then have a method of grouping them, categorizing them, and then looking at them over time. That will give us a sense of direction. Okay, these are the things I understand, these are the things I'm having problems with. But constant learning, okay, and that learning cannot happen without a reading habit. And that's where I find that the youth of modern people who have been born the last 25 years or so, I think that's a disadvantage, because you are exposed to the cell phone very early, and then somehow you start doing things digitally, and somehow that reading habit seems to have a direct um, proportionate, or what do you call it, disproportionate. It has the reverse effect. Okay, the more time you
Indirect
spend,
proportion. Yes.
inverse, whatever, I
Inverse
don't forget the,
proportion.
yeah, mathematical term for it, physics. Okay, a reading habit is not there. That's a very sad thing. And if they can, that is why I suggest reading fiction. Why you read fiction? Because it's a story. Some that will at least hold you on. And then fiction, you see the day-to-day, all the day-to-day words that are used. Okay, that is what you see in fiction. And ideally, that is what you'll have to handle within editing, because you may see very big words, bombastic words, medical terminology or technical terminology, but you may look at the dictionary, the relevant dictionary, to find out the meaning. That is something that you will do automatically. But the bulk of editing is related to day-to-day words, how they are put together, strung together, and how the meaning changes. By a simple transposition, the entire meaning changes and all that. The emphasis changes, the voice changes, or the expression changes and all that. So reading constantly and having a sense of purpose with that learning. Okay, I still believe that if you can do this, you will become a copy editor and you will be able to shine. It will take time. Nature doesn't give its fruits so easily. Nature is a very demanding teacher, but a very just teacher. It takes a very long time. And we shouldn't be expecting quick results. 3 years we do a graduation, then 2 more years of post graduation. And if somebody's a medical doctor, it takes 5-6 years, and then they have a in-house residency or something they have. Okay, so it does take time, and so expecting a very quick results, that's it. It's not practical. See, for example, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't remember. Surgery was done. Robotic surgery was done. But some doctor was sitting in Israel or another. The patient was in some other country. They were able to do precise surgery, cut open the person, and then do the surgery. Okay. And can you do that kind of editing? It's not possible even today. Okay, even the book that Springer has brought out. I mean, there are so many sentences that don't make sense. Okay, so it's writing and thinking are definitely a lot more difficult than many other things that can be done with technology. Okay, the extension help of technology. So we can't expect to grow very fast, but still, because it is a challenging field, if you're good at it, definitely there will be rewards, financial rewards. I don't deny that at all. I don't think, uh, how long do I study? Will I be able to earn? No, you will be able to earn if you're good at it. Patience, patience,
I
patience.
think at some point of time, learning and earning happen parallelly. It cannot so I'll learn something and then put that into use for earning. It doesn't happen that way after some point of time.
True.
Anyway, so I have a few questions. Two of them are like 10-mark questions, and a few of them are like 1-mark questions. So what I would like to do is, in fact, I have a couple of questions on the art of copy editing. I'm split between whether I should ask those questions because we are almost 1 hour now, and or take this for a separate session where we talk about the courses and your plans for future and other things.
Murugaraj, maybe you can do a rapid fire.
I
A
think
rapid
one of the
fire,
questions I can do. Yes.
a rapid fire round for the remaining questions. Maybe
Okay.
15 more
Okay.
minutes.
Priya used to have a rapid fire at the beginning, so you are suggesting that we'll end that with a rapid fire. Okay. So, all right. So, in a few words, what makes a copy editor copy editor?
What makes a copy editor a copy editor? If somebody can do editing, I mean, I think we have spoken enough about the efforts that's required. Okay.
2 to 3 words.
No, I understand. So we are not going to the efforts. If somebody can do copy editing and then say, okay, I've done this, I take responsibility for it. Let anybody in the world check this. Give me feedback. I'm confident of what I've done. Okay. And if there is something wrong that I've done, I accept it. If somebody can reach that point, that is how I would define a copy editor. Let
Excellent.
anybody in the world check this.
Excellent. So when compared to our European and Western counterparts, what is our strength and what should we improve on?
My understanding is that earlier, when things were done abroad, the typesetting was also done there. For example, the copy editors, they used to just look at the language, okay, and so many things they may miss, they may not do, they may not attend to at all. The typesetter, because his tongue is also English, native tongue is, so he simply is able to understand what is to be done. He fixes a lot of things. And when you take that typesetting and bring it to India, I mean, because the whole chunk is coming down here, and then when the copy editors don't do those things that are required, and our typesetters try to fix it here, there are a lot of complications. Say, for example, H2 is not identified as H2.
It's a rapid fire, sir. I know this question. I said this is one of those 10-mark questions. I know that. Please go ahead. That was a lighter note. Please go ahead.
In India, we are pretty strong with markup. Okay, they are able to pick it up. The language, we have a long way to go.
Yes, I think of Pearson coming out with creating the XML markups for their books way back in 2006 or 7. They try to automate it using Excel, one of your favorite areas.
Excel.
Yeah, Excel. Okay, so they have given some major markup categories, and then you can create subcategories into them by inserting a few rows and then generating tags automatically. So an editor need not remember all the tags. Maybe there may be 200 250 tags for the entire manuscript markup tags, but knowing how to create those tags, that's the most important. All you need to know is what are the first level tags, and from there on how to create further.
I'm afraid I can't answer this question in a few.
No, I was just sharing that.
No, okay.
So, but we have moved a long way from that. The tagging, it's almost automated nowadays. The structuring part that happens in the companies nowadays, that's magic.
Even in books. where you have a lot of colored books where you have different so many elements. I don't think it can be done that way. I don't think it can be done that way. At least to my knowledge, I've not seen. In journal work, yes, quite a lot can be automated.
Yeah. The style sheets are more robust there, obviously.
No, the number of elements, the sheer number of elements, 250 elements, 300 elements in a book. Okay, it's not easy to automate. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't automate it. Okay.
Yeah, we see that from the the specifications for a journal and a book.
Yeah.
You look at the specs of journals; they are almost similar. Sometimes you get lost when you refer to different journals.
Journal maximum 50, 60 elements. Maximum. You may not require. Generally, you may require 20 or 30 or whatever. But in books, it can be phenomenal. Now,
Fast.
yeah, I have been lucky enough to handle a bunch of 6, 7, 8 publishers, all books. Okay. And as you said, Pearson, I've seen that list. Okay. Very long list, Excel. Okay. And we used to have a kind of a template where we used to handle any journal, any book, any style. We used to handle it very easily. It'll just need 1 hour setup time, half an hour setup time. Okay. But I know that the same similar books that come to them directly for typesetting. We used to use word styles. Okay. We used to use word styles. The typesetters, for them, the books that come to them directly, they will have to use Pearson's codes, and they used to struggle
to trans.
I mean, so many problems. New things will come up. New things will come up, and then they won't know what to do. They'll come and ask us. But we had a template where, I mean, it was a struggle. It was not easy. At least 5 years I spent preparing that template and mastering it. And the only thing the editor has to know is, what is the thing the editor has to do to identify the element, right? And that a person has to do and will know. And that is the only thing the person has to know to set it right.
Okay, so you said, what was that we lack against our European and US counterparts, the Western counterparts? You said language. So my basically my next question was that how we can strengthen
training. There's no other method.
No training. Are you suggesting a structured training or training is a wide-ranging thing?
This has to come from the industry. Okay, this has to come from the industry, and as you said, this is not a field where people say I want to become an editor. I want to become an editor because it's such a booming field. I mean, it's not like that. People know that. Okay, but still, I started the art of copy editing because I'm convinced there is so much of potential. Number one. Number two. No matter how much artificial intelligence can evolve, I don't think it can replace human thinking. I don't believe it. I simply do not believe that. Okay, and in relation to this, we have something else already going on. Social media, that itself is good, and it is having it has its own problems. Okay, that pretty recently I saw a documentary, The Social Dilemma. Okay, I think it's on Netflix. I mean, anybody can look at it. I would suggest that you look at it. And there are some of the best people there who've been in top posts in the best companies, social media companies. They've come out and spoken a lot. Okay, and a lot has been documented. That means, okay, social media has got its good things, but there are some very serious problems that are happening. And if we don't attend to them, we will have a problem as a species. As human beings. The same thing with artificial intelligence. It is very good. It's very powerful. Much of your reference automation, whatever style automation that you're talking about, identification automation, it is just some aspect of artificial intelligence. This will have to be governed. And when you govern it, you will see that the thinking part has to be there. If you lose track of that, human beings as a species will cease to exist. That's the only thing we do. From morning till night, we think till we sleep, right? So that regulation will happen in nature. So I don't believe that copy editing will go. As long as man is on this planet, there will be curiosity. The cure for
I think the question on the back of many copy editors is copy editing will be there, whether there will be copy editors or AI that will do copy editing.
put it this way, now, see, even to build AI, you
We
will
need
need the
copy
best
editors.
copy editors. You will need the best copy editors, and we have to be very strong in language.
Yeah, that's true. I think Divya has an interesting point to share. When she worked with Emerald Books, they also had a lot of fixed book style for automation. Book style. So
Can you tell me the timeline so that I can look at the query?
I think that was the last question. No, it's not a question. So basically, she shared her experience of working with Emerald Books in her earlier organization, where they had fixed book styles. So automation was possible. Yes, I think automation is still possible in books. It is not that books do not have any automated tools, but I think the way the tools are robust for journals, the books are not. I mean, the automation tools are not as robust as they are for journals. I think that's what Dr. Venkat and
See,
I.
I think, MS Word is, when they moved from doc to docx, the X actually stands for XML support, the background. Okay.
Mm.
And if you really style a file correctly, it can be taken in very well into 3v2 or InDesign. Okay. So there is definitely a good transition it is possible. But the styling of the document, if it is done correctly, you can have a very decent automation there. I don't see
That's
that.
true. That's true. All right, so I think I have exhausted most of my questions. There are things that I would like for you to share about the art of copy editing. Maybe another session with you, either Murugaraj as a host or somebody else a host. There are a lot of students, in ICF for courses. Maybe some of them come forward and then talk about the courses and your future plan. What next on art of copy editing and other things.
Well, I see a comment here by
I
Neerja
think
Sharma.
Nirja, yeah.
I'm currently doing Dr. Venkat's course on the
I'm
basic
currently doing Dr.
editing.
Venkat's course on the basics of copy editing. Dr. Venkat is a fantastic teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Neerja.
He certainly is. Yes.
I mean,
So, yes, you were about to say something,
it
please.
just comes to me naturally. Okay. I mean, my
Share that. I have to share this last part of my sharing here. When I completed my higher secondary education, and my father suggested that I take BA English. And I said, BA English? Oh, no, no way. I'll take something else. And then I chose BSc Mathematics. My family is a family of teachers, full of teachers. From both of my parents, my grandparents, a lot of my uncles and aunts. We can run a school with teachers in my family. Okay, so that's how. So I grew kind of averse to being a teacher, becoming a teacher. So I said no, I don't want to become a teacher. So when I completed BSc, my father said, oh, you should sign up for a B.Ed course so that you can become a teacher. I said no, I'm not becoming a teacher. But it so happened that I ended up taking up language editing as my career, copy editing as my career, and teaching as my passion.
slowly. Okay.
Yeah, in hindsight, I think I should have listened to what my father said some time back. So thank you for this wonderful session.
There's one question that I want to answer here.
Please,
Okay. That is,
please.
Nirja. Yes, I remember that particular comment you made, okay, on LinkedIn, and then the answer you got, Nirja. Springer bringing up a book, completely automated book. Okay, I've seen quite a lot. Okay, I've seen that book, sort of ripped it apart in so many ways. Don't worry. Okay, that is artificial intelligence is a long way off. Okay, it may not happen anywhere in our lifetimes. You can't take that book and give it to anybody. Okay, no researcher will be able to really understand it the way it has been done. So don't worry about that statement made by that head of that publishing company. Okay, if you read the introduction to that book, you will know that people who actually worked on that project they themselves were very clear about the limitations, and they have just presented the book without any copy editing. The introduction has been written and it has been copy edited, but the rest of the book is not been copy edited, and you will find not even one sentence that is grammatically correct. Okay, I can tell you that. So don't worry about it.
So with that note of reassurance, long live copy editing, long live copy editors.
Yeah, it might change. Finally, it might come to boil down to most of it is only language. It might reach that point, but even some of it can be automated. I remember the last company I worked with, they had a peculiar workflow. But we'll submit 40 articles. The next day morning, they'll give me feedback for all of them. Okay, and a huge chunk of it will be related to language, because they were very clear about the patterns of mistakes that people make. Okay, and then what is the correct form? It was put through some automation. It was a tech workflow, and that means a lot can be corrected that way. I think Enago is already working on something like that.
Anyway, so thank you, thank you for this wonderful time and sharing your experience and your insights into training and about copy editing. Thank you very much, and we look forward to another session taking this forward from here. And thank you, Vivek, for arranging this, and to all the participants who are part of here in the Zoom call and in the
Yep.
live. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
thanks, Murugaraj, and thanks, Dr. Venkat. And before we end, I would like to ask one question that is from Magic Prince. What should be the steps an aspiring editor takes on the path of learning copy editing? Because I think that it's a very important question for people who are
Is
new
in
to
the
this
chat
field.
box. Is in the chat.
Yeah.
What should be the steps an aspiring editor takes on the path of learning copy editing? See, there is a 45-minute video on the Art of Copy Editing website. Okay, and I think I've also explained that there are 4 basic slides that I've used to explain that. Now, to simplify that, put it in a nutshell, first look at the stylistic aspects, learn that, and then move on to language. Those stylistic aspects are not just mechanical things, they are things that prepare you to take up the analytical tasks that are so important to language editing. So this is a very brief answer I can give.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Venkat, and thanks, Murugaraj, for grilling Dr. Venkat. Next, in the next session, you are going to be in the hot seat.
Yeah.
I don't know what questions. Murugaraj will be in the hot seat on the 28th of November.
Okay.
Surit is going to be drilling me.
And tomorrow we will have a session on indexing by Mr. P.K. Jayanthan. And next Saturday, because it's Diwali, we will not have an interview session. So what I will try to do is have a Facebook live session where you can ask questions and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. And that's all for now. See you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Have a nice day.